Carol Christian Poell is a designer who I'm sure many people's first introduction to was some form of reverse gatekeeping shock value. For me, it was seeing the drip sneakers and circles of hell meme on a forum, but for others it may have been something like the human hair tie or the pig purse being paraded on Instagram. That introduction was a long time ago for me, and for years I never took the brand all that seriously. It was more of a freak show to behold, something to gawk at or be intimidated by, rather than something to engage in and unravel. About 2 years ago, I started running into more of his work in a more casual, grounded context, and began to take a serious interest in it, and learned that there was a lot more to it than I had been led to believe. It is true that CCP is one of the few names in modern fashion that has managed to maintain its mysterious and out-of-reach image, which is impressive in today's world. But despite the secret club reputation, the spotty amount of information, and limited retailer options, at the end of the day, this is a real brand making real designs that you might want to own and wear. For me, one of those designs was the iconic Tornado boot, which is probably CCP's best-selling model. As far as I'm aware, almost all, if not all, CCP items come in this zipper bag made of an IKEA bag-like material, which is affectionately referred to as the rice bag. It's not my packaging preference for such an expensive product, not to mention I'd love to see the CCP take on a proper shoebox, but seeing as this is a signature for the brand, I'll refrain from complaining about it. The boots came wrapped in these rather nice black cloths. Inside each boot, you'll find what is by a country mile the most tissue paper I've ever seen inside a piece of new footwear. I'm glad they did it though, as it prevents any unsightly bending or creasing that may happen in transit, like what happened on my Rick boots. Affixed to one boot is a product information booklet, which provides information on the leather, product code, and offers up a strange bit of advice on caring for the boots, which I think I'll pass on. Also included are a set of insoles, which are neatly presented with a cotton ribbon. Moving on to the boots themselves, when I say this, I mean it. These are exquisite. They're no contest the most impressive wearable item I've ever had. They are so unbelievably detailed, they seriously look like something that might have been stolen from a museum. It's an overwhelmingly detailed look, and not a single inch of them betrays that. This pair is done in Coors leather, which is horse, though the pamphlet indicates that cow leather was used for the inner lining. In a previous video, I showed off a pair of Guidi boots, which are also horsehide, and while those are excellent, this Coors leather feels much more exotic. Whatever treatment CCP puts this leather through results in an incredibly unique look and finish. They are extremely shiny, like a buffed leather, but they don't feel buffed, and they maintain the natural look of the full-grain hide, showing imperfections just like the Guidis. The way light plays off of every little crease and fold gives them a luster that itself is part of the look of the boot. The in-hand feel is slightly more glossy than that of the Guidis, but the zipper itself is more structurally rigid in its form. However, the second you unzip them, the leather gives way and contorts with ease. I can't praise this Coors leather enough, both in its quality and appearance. It is truly unlike anything else I've experienced. It also feels so durable too, I have to imagine these will age extremely well. One of CCP's hallmark techniques is of course object dyeing, wherein the item itself is first completed, then dyed in its entirety. Part of the purpose of that process is to give a uniform consistency between the upper and stacked leather sole, though that is less relevant on this specific pair. However, it still imbues a rich, deep color, and this CCP color code 10, which is black, is the most pure black I've ever seen on a pair of shoes, to the point where they gave my poor iPhone camera a hard time. The craftsmanship is just as impressive as the leather. This design requires relatively minimal stitching, but what is there is flawless, specifically on the double stitch that secures the zipper, which I imagine is extremely difficult to execute. Unfortunately, it is difficult to observe the finer details on the sole for obvious reasons, but these are Goodyear welted and uniquely feature an exposed metal shank, which you can still faintly make out, and inside, you can see the nails which secure the stacked leather heel. Also inside, the CCP branding is debossed along with the shoe size. There is also a fabric tag with a number that denotes the production number within the batch. When I was just beginning to get into CCP, I was under the impression that these tornado boots and the prosthetic boots were the same thing, just with the addition of the metal bits. That is not the case. The prosthetic is a one-piece upper construction, much like the famous Guidi back zips, while these plain tornadoes have an extra panel. What they both do share though is the spiral zipper, from which the tornado name is derived. The spiral zipper is a loud visual statement, but the execution is perhaps more impressive. Zippers generally don't want to go sideways, and I've found that on other shoes, they don't always want to go in a straight line either, especially when the leather starts to develop some creasing. Somehow, these are the easiest and smoothest operating zippers I've ever had on a shoe. Go figure. It's a two-way zipper, and they are purportedly YKK Excellas. Both zips have CCP branding, and they've been intentionally tarnished. While the zipper may be the highlight, my personal favorite part of the design has to be the toe. Unlike the Guidis, it is extremely pointed, almost comically protruding like a witch's shoe and curling upward, forming a few stacks or folds. While the silhouette itself isn't particularly challenging, it's the small details like this that add up to make these a statement piece. Finally, let's talk about the infamous drip. Philosophically, it plays into this irony or almost brutal sarcasm that I've noticed with CCP work. With a traditional leather sole, durability is a concern, with many opting to have a cobbler install rubber soles. CCP's solution is this extreme measure of dipping the entire bottom of the shoes into a vat of some sort of latex or rubber. So there's a practical origin for this solution, but it was executed in the most odd way possible, which then leads to a unique visual appearance. I feel like his work predominantly comes from that place, where the techniques and construction are the main design elements more so than things like silhouettes or ornamentation. The way the drip plays with the stacked leather heel looks like a chocolate-dipped ice cream cone, and I really enjoyed the brownish coffee color happening along the edge of the drip. I'm not sure if it's intentional, as I haven't noticed it on a lot of other examples, but I presume it's an interaction between the heat of the latex and the dye, which is exposing the true color of the hide. I love it, it's gorgeous, and adds an extra bit of detail that further highlights the drip. Another cool incidental detail is the impression from the bottom zip. Of course, the most striking detail that results from this technique are these stalactite-like drips on the sole, which are likely a result of these curing at an angle. On this particular pair, those drips are quite intense. The drip also gives these a break-in process unlike any other shoe. You must endure walking around like a weirdo as you wear down or break off those spikes, until it eventually becomes an even surface. I've worn mine over a dozen times, and while I've done some damage, they're more resilient than you'd think, so once it does become a flat sole, I imagine it will hold up for a while. I also had this expectation of these being somewhat gummy or sticky, potentially picking up a lot of debris such as gravel or bits of trash. Surprisingly, that's not really the case. It's pretty hard, and I haven't had any issues with things sticking to it or vice versa, though it can sound pretty gross on more glossy surfaces. Really, the only practical drawback is the lack of tread and grip, which makes these poorly suited to inclement weather despite how well sealed they must be. From a visual perspective, I feel the drip has a transformative effect on the tornado boot design. If you look at these without the drip, they can kind of appear like cowboy boots, especially in different colors and leathers. But in this configuration, it's dark, gothic, and grotesque, an otherworldly look that I don't think has a true substitute. There's only one problem with that, and it's that they're so good, so detailed, that they make everything else around them look bad. And because of that, I have found that these are incredibly difficult to wear. The silhouette itself is not challenging and should go with a lot, but the hyper-detailed exotic look of these will have so many pairs of pants looking like Kmart. It's less about finding a stylistic pairing and more about finding pants that can stand up to the scrutiny of being next to such an otherworldly piece of footwear. I've seen some people do the Yohji Yamamoto wide flowing cropped pants look with these, but generally speaking, I think you need to be wearing these with slim or even tapered pants that go over the shaft of the boot. I've tried some pants that meet or slightly tuck into the shaft, and I don't think it works at all. I think ideally you'd wear these CCP boots with some of the CCP trousers, which tend to be rather slim. One of the few pairs of pants I have that work really well with these are these Julius denims. They have these zips on them, and I find that unzipping them all the way gives a nice flare effect, and I love the way the zipper of the pants transitions into the zipper of the boot. So it can be a little difficult to work with these, but it's extremely rewarding, and again, it's so impressive looking on foot with a good outfit. There's just nothing else that looks quite like it. CCP has its own sizing system, and with handcrafted and object-dyed shoes, there is a lot of room for variance, even between the left and right shoe of a pair. The common wisdom I've seen online is that you should subtract 2 from your US size. For example, if you're a US size 9, you should get a CCP size 7. I didn't exactly heed that advice due to availability, and ended up with a CCP size 8 when my true size is a US 9 or EU 42. They absolutely fit large on me, though I was able to fix it with third-party insoles. The CCP insoles are not thick enough, and they have a very glossy finish that was making my foot slide around. Because of that and the lack of a heel cup, I would recommend going with that common wisdom of 2 sizes down from your US size. Like I mentioned, the zipper is unbelievably easy to work, and these also have the easiest ingress-egress of any shoe I've had, which is totally unexpected from a small batch artisanal boot. Comfort is also a pleasant surprise. They are nowhere near as hard as the Vibram'd Guidis, and the provided insole is quite plush. Really, the biggest issue here is breaking in the drips. It's awkward, you look like you have an issue, and it gets worse before it gets better, since the drips wear down and break off unevenly, effectively giving you a lopsided sole. Once it wears down and effectively becomes a flat sole, there shouldn't be any issues. I got these for a little under $1,800 last year from the library when the pound was near its weakest. It's the most I've ever spent on shoes, and it is not an inconsequential amount of money. Yet, I feel less damaged by it than something like my Rick boots, which cost basically half the price. It's one of those things where it is exorbitantly expensive, but stands in a class of its own. It's not just a style statement, it's a really unique piece, and I find myself appreciating the construction and materials just as much as the look. I wouldn't recommend putting yourself into debt for these, but if you appreciate them and have a closet that's up to the task of supporting them, I can't imagine you'll be disappointed, even in light of the astronomical price tag. That's all I've got for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.